"I don't have enough money to buy coffee," Claire blurted out, her voice trembling so much that even she felt ashamed. She stood outside the Rosewood Cafe, her hand clutching the strap of an old, worn-out purse, inside it only a few crumpled bills. Through the misted glass, a man in a gray sweater sat by the window, his little boy innocently showing off a drawing of a dragon on a napkin. Claire's heart pounded wildly, louder and faster than the hiss of the bus brakes screeching to a stop on the street outside. In the pocket of her coat, the neatly folded piece of paper whispered softly, "Just show up." The Rosewood Cafe radiated a gentle warmth, the scent of freshly roasted coffee blending with a faint trace of vanilla, making anyone who walked in feel as if they were wrapped in a soft blanket. Claire hesitated as she stepped through the wooden door, the small bell chiming softly yet loud enough to startle her. Her heart was still racing, and her hand gripped the strap of her bag as though she feared she might run away at any moment. At that moment, the man by the window looked up. His deep blue eyes met hers, startled for a second, then quickly shifting into a courteous smile, so calm it only made Claire feel more out of place. She spoke, her voice hoarse, as though afraid the sound itself might shatter in the air. She had come from Street Mary's nursing home, and Mrs. Helen had told her to meet someone here. A blink. A flicker of surprise appeared, then faded, leaving only a mix of wonder and warmth in his eyes. The man Andrew Whitaker suddenly recalled his mother's message, the woman he had always thought only enjoyed arranging trivial matters. But this time, clearly, she had another intention. With a light laugh tinged with fondness, he invited Claire to sit down, then signaled discreetly for the staff to bring another cup of coffee. Claire fumbled, her cheeks flushing pink partly from embarrassment, partly from being unaccustomed to the elegant atmosphere of the place. She had not expected that her presence would place her face to face with the man newspapers often called the reclusive millionaire, a successful figure who had almost vanished from the noisy soirees of high society. She had once vaguely heard the name Andrew Whitaker in an old article tied to sustainable real estate projects, but she had never imagined she would stand this close. While she was still awkwardly trying to find a place to set down her old bag, Claire suddenly heard a soft giggle nearby. A little boy, about 4 years old, with tousled golden hair and eyes as bright as a summer lake, sat snugly in a high chair. He held up a paper napkin covered with crayon scribbles, a dragon spitting out circles of candy. Light from the window streamed in, catching the child's smile and making the entire moment shine brighter than the rest of the cafe. Claire found herself smiling back. In her chest, a vague feeling crept in, part envy, part yearning. How long had it been since she had seen such simple joy? Andrew tilted his head, his gaze quietly observing Claire's reaction. To him, the arrival of this stranger was not just one of his mother's harmless little arrangements. From the very first glance, he had sensed something different. A mix of shyness yet sincerity, weariness yet carrying some hidden strength. That intrigued him more than anything else. Claire tried to steady herself, but her hands still twisted the strap of her bag unconsciously. She was acutely aware of the contrast between herself and this world, from her frayed old coat to the warm light reflecting on the expensive frames of Andrew's glasses. And yet, instead of making her feel small, his smile seemed to gently draw her closer. For a few moments, all the sounds of the cafe seemed to fade, leaving only Claire's quickened breath and the soft scratch of crayons on paper as Elliot the little boy continued to create his own magical world. Each line, each giggle seemed to erase the invisible distance between them. Claire suddenly realized that even while sitting silently, she was being pulled into that small but warm circle. Outside, Portland's drizzle still fell lightly, tapping steadily against the glass panes. Inside, a small table had become an unlikely meeting point. A solitary millionaire, an innocent child, and a woman so poor she could not afford a cup of coffee. Yet fate had chosen this very moment to bind them together, And in that instant, none of the three knew that a story was beginning, one that might forever change each of their lives. And what about you? If you were sitting before such a scene, would you believe that a fleeting moment in an ordinary cafe could open up an entire destiny? Well then, my dear viewers, stay tuned for a story that will leave you in awe. Take just a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly resonate with what I'm sharing here. And don't forget to leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. The sounds of the Rosewood Cafe seem to fade away, leaving just enough silence for hidden wounds to speak. Morning light streamed through the window pane, spilling across the small table, where a silver spoon gently swirled in a steaming cup of coffee. Claire sat across from him, her eyes meeting the shadow of the man before her, realizing that beneath his composure there was still a fracture that refused to heal. Andrew was a millionaire, a name familiar in the press whenever people spoke of sustainable real estate projects. Yet behind the glamorous facade of success lay an immense void he had never been able to fill. His wife had left only weeks after Elliot's first birthday. No argument, no farewell, just a short note left on the empty kitchen table. That day he came home, calling out her name, but the apartment answered only with a chilling silence and the desperate cries of a child. From that moment on, Andrew understood his life had been split in two. One half continued on the headlines, the other half buried in the small room where he rocked his baby to sleep with trembling hands. Wealth could not compensate for the emptiness every time he looked at the vacant chair beside the dining table. Endless shareholder meetings and multi-million-dollar contracts only wore him down further, because each night when he returned home, all that remained was Elliot with his wide, questioning eyes and the unspoken thought, "Where is Mom?" Andrew swore to himself that he would never let anyone step into the world he had built for himself and his son again. He erected walls solid as the very buildings he constructed to shield himself from being hurt a second time. Claire listened in silence. Her heart ached with each detail he shared, because in his story she could see her own reflection. Her life had been no less harsh. As a nurse at Mary's nursing home, she worked tirelessly every day, from checking medications to guiding frail patients down the corridors. The pay was meager, yet each month Claire sent most of it back to Ohio, where her ailing mother remained in long-term care. For the past 2 years, she hadn't been able to afford even a single visit home. Some months, after paying rent for her tiny apartment and her mother's medical bills, her wallet was so empty that dinner meant nothing more than instant noodles. There was no one to share the burden, no one to lean on. Claire had grown used to pulling herself back up after exhaustion. Sometimes she watched couples holding hands on the street, radiant smiles lighting their faces, and wondered if she would ever be loved again. Andrew's gaze slowly settled on Claire's face, as though looking into a mirrored reflection. In her, he did not see pity, but a rare endurance, a resilience he had almost forgotten human beings could possess. And Claire, when she looked at Andrew, did not see a distant millionaire, but a lonely man carrying the pain of abandonment, a pain no different from her own sleepless nights longing for her mother. Elliot remained absorbed in his drawing, each carefree line on the napkin like the rhythm of innocent breathing, creating a striking contrast with the heavy atmosphere between the two adults. They did not need to say much, yet the lengthening silences spoke volumes. It was a quiet understanding, an undercurrent of feeling flowing across the small wooden table, linking two hearts long accustomed to endurance. Claire lowered her head slightly, shame welling up inside her. She thought of the few bills left in her wallet, of her worn-down shoes, and questioned what she was doing here, sitting before a man who held the world in his hands. But when she looked up again, Andrew's eyes made her falter. There was no judgment there, no pity, only a sincere look, as though he recognized in her something he had forgotten, the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what. Time seemed to slow. A man who had lost faith in love. A woman who had grown too familiar with sacrifice. Between them, there were no sweet promises, only silent scars, like two broken pieces unexpectedly fitting together. And in that small cafe, for the first time in years, they both realized one truth. They were not entirely alone. But was this shared empathy merely a fleeting moment, or could it become something greater, something powerful enough to change the course of their lives? The hallways of Street Mary's nursing home were always quiet in the afternoons, filled only with the faint rattle of wheelchairs and the distant beeping of heart monitors. That day, the last light of the sun streamed through the windows, casting streaks of amber across the worn tile floor. Elliot toddled ahead, his little shoes clattering against the ground as if playing his own private melody. Andrew smiled, chatting briefly with a nurse on duty while still keeping an eye on his son. But just one moment of distraction was enough for mischief to find its chance. The long bench pressed against the wall meant only for waiting guests suddenly became a stage. Elliot scrambled up, small legs moving quickly, golden hair tousled in the sunlight. His face lit up as though he had discovered a brand new game. "Daddy, watch me jump!" he shouted, his voice bubbling with innocence. But the joy hadn't lasted a second before his tiny foot slipped from the edge of the bench. In an instant, the world seemed to freeze. Andrew hadn't yet turned his head when a figure lunged forward. Claire, in her simple white blouse and worn nurse's shoes, reacted by pure instinct. Her arms opened wide, catching Elliot before his small body could hit the floor. The crash never came. Instead, there was only the sound of ragged breathing, pounding heartbeats, and a cry breaking out in fright. Elliot buried his face into Claire's shoulder, his small frame trembling, tears streaming down his cheeks. Claire held him tightly, her fingers gently stroking the soft strands of his hair. She didn't speak much, only whispered soothing words, enough to slow the rhythm of his heartbeat. Her hands shook slightly, but there was a strange steadiness in them, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Andrew turned, and for a few seconds he stood frozen. The sight before him pierced through every invisible wall he had built to shield himself. A woman who was a stranger, no blood ties, no obligation, was holding his son with a love so pure, so uncalculated. Something he had believed only a mother could give now revealed itself in this simple, unguarded act. The room around them still hummed with ventilators and nurses exchanging words, but in Andrew's mind everything else dimmed away. Only that moment remained, the moment Claire transformed fear into safety, tears into comfort. Elliot stopped crying, lifted his tear-stained face to look at her, then sighed softly, as if trusting that in those arms he would always be safe. Claire knew she was only doing what anyone should do, protecting a child. But to Andrew, it meant far more. He looked at her not with the eyes of a wealthy man observing an ordinary nurse, but with the eyes of a father who had just witnessed a small miracle. A miracle not born from wealth or contracts, but from a heart that reached out at exactly the right moment. In that instant, Andrew felt something stir within him, something familiar yet long dormant. Trust. Trust that perhaps there could exist someone who, without promises or grandeur, could shake the walls of his inner world with one sincere gesture. Claire continued to hold Elliot, rocking him gently, patting his back in a soft rhythm as if lulling him into calm. As the boy's sobs quieted, his small arms looped around her neck, clinging as if afraid that letting go would mean losing this safe haven. Andrew stepped closer, hesitated for half a second before laying his hand on his son's shoulder. His eyes met Claire's. No words were spoken, yet an unspoken understanding passed through the space between them. In that look, Andrew realized that sometimes true love doesn't begin with grand vows, but with the simple moment when someone is willing to reach out and save what matters most to us. Through an instinctive reaction, Claire had become part of his and his son's story, even if she had not yet realized it herself. Was this only a fleeting coincidence, or the beginning of a deeper bond, one strong enough to change all three of their lives? My dear viewers, take a breath, maybe grab a glass of water, and stay with us. The story ahead is full of even greater surprises. Comment 1 if you think this story is worth it, so we'll know you're still here with us. That noon, the little diner tucked away on bustling Pearl Street, with its old red brick walls and the scent of crisp toasted bread filling the air, felt like a haven. At the table near the window, three people seemed to have found their own quiet rhythm. Andrew watched his son in silence. Elliot giggled as he dipped fries into his soup, and Claire sipped her tea, her gentle gaze lingering on them both. None of them knew that these peaceful moments were nothing more than a fragile pause before a storm. The soft chime of the doorbell rang, and a gust of wind swept in. The sharp beat of high heels struck the wooden floor, confident, deliberate. A woman appeared, tall, with sleek black hair, perfectly groomed, every step radiating the air of someone accustomed to owning every glance in the room. Her sharp features and cold smile skimmed across the diner before settling on the table where Andrew and Claire sat. In that instant, the color seemed to drain from the room. Andrew froze, his chest tightening, the air around him turning to ice. The woman Vanessa, his ex-wife, the one who had vanished without a word of farewell, now stood there as though the years of absence had never existed. The name he had long refused to speak was suddenly made flesh before him. Striding closer, Vanessa leaned in, her gaze sliding over Claire like an unspoken judgment before landing on Elliot. The smile on her lips shifted, softening into the sweetness only a mother could wear. She bent down, arms reaching out, intent on lifting her child. But Elliot, still busy scribbling with his crayon, suddenly stiffened. His wide eyes brimmed with panic before he burst into tears. "No!" His cry rang out, high and clear, filling the diner. He squirmed, legs kicking frantically, his face flushed with fear. In the chaos of that moment, Claire's arms were already there. Elliot flung himself toward her as though her embrace was the only safe place left in the world. His head pressed hard against her shoulder, his sobs choking, his tiny fingers clutching her shirt with desperate strength. The room exploded in silence. Curious eyes turned toward them, every diner now a witness. Andrew sat rigid, fists clenched tight, straining to hold back the eruption inside him. The woman who had once abandoned her family now stood before them, but instead of being welcomed, she was rejected by her own child. Claire sat still, holding Elliot close, offering no explanation. Inside her, a storm of emotions rose. Compassion for the boy, worry for Andrew, and a vague fear for herself. She knew this was no chance encounter. It was the signal of a battle yet to come. Vanessa straightened, her smile vanishing, replaced by a glare sharp as glass. Her eyes locked on Andrew, brimming with challenge and pride. In that instant, Claire understood. This woman had not come to reconcile or apologize. She had come to reclaim what she had once thrown away. Andrew drew a long breath, the old wounds rushing back. He remembered the day he returned to an empty apartment, the cold note left behind, and the endless years he had carried the weight alone. But now, he was no longer that solitary man. He had Elliot, and, it seemed, he had Claire too, the woman who had become his son's anchor with nothing more than an instinctive embrace. No one in the diner spoke. Only Elliot's ragged breathing, Claire's pounding heartbeat, and the thick silence filled the air. In that moment, roles were upended. The biological mother stood outside. The father wrestled silently with his past, and a stranger became the one the child chose. Andrew knew this moment had split open a new fault line, where past and present collided violently, and he also knew the storm had only just begun. So what do you think? When a child has already chosen the heart they belong to, is there any power strong enough to change it? Afternoon light spilled through the tall windows of a downtown Portland office building, streaking across the glass like the marks of time etched into memory. Inside the spacious yet heavy room, Andrew set a thick file onto the wooden desk. The thud echoed, cutting through the silence. Pages of white paper stamped with red seals lay before him, cold, unyielding evidence of a past he had never wished to revisit. Claire sat across from him, her hands lightly entwined. Her heart pounded as Andrew opened the file, each rustle of paper like a dry, relentless melody that could not be silenced. And then, the truth unfolded. Vanessa, the woman who had walked away from her family, had signed away her parental rights. No visits, no shared responsibility, not even a single line of objection. She had drifted off like a passing breeze, leaving everything on this man's shoulders. The room seemed to sink, its air growing dense. Claire closed her eyes, and the image of Elliot in her arms just days ago returned. That child, with clear eyes and innocent laughter, had once waited for his mother to come back, never knowing that, on paper, he had already been abandoned. Her chest tightened, as though an unseen hand was gripping her heart, making it hard to breathe. Andrew lifted his head slightly, his voice low, carrying the weariness of years repressed. He said that recently, his mother Helen had changed her will, leaving the entire life insurance payout to Elliot. A gesture of deep love, hoping her grandson's future would be secure whether she lived or not. But somehow, Vanessa had found out. And now, her return had nothing to do with motherhood, it revolved around money. Claire froze. Every sweet false gaze, every confident step, every sharp smile Vanessa had worn now had only one explanation. She wasn't here for Elliot. She was here for what the numbers could offer. A mother returning not to hold her child, but to seize a financial chance. The truth stung Claire's heart with both sorrow and fury, though she knew she had no official right to interfere. The silence thickened in the room. Only the soft roll of a metal pen across the desk and Andrew's heavy sigh broke it. Outside the door, Elliot sat in the waiting room, his small legs swinging, a crayon in hand. His bright voice called out, "Daddy, I finished my drawing!" Andrew and Claire turned at once. On the paper, Elliot had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a blazing sun. A tall man, a woman with long hair, and a child in between. The lines were shaky but alive, holding a truth no document could erase. In his heart, family already had a shape. Claire bit her lip, her eyes stinging. That innocent drawing was the strongest counterweight to the cold signatures lying on the desk. On one side, the ink of abandonment. On the other, the trembling lines of hope. And in the middle, Andrew stood torn between a bitter past and a fragile present that glowed with light. He looked at Claire, his eyes heavy with emotions too complex to name. In that moment, he saw one truth clearly. Not Vanessa, but this woman, through her simple gestures and unconditional embrace, had given Elliot faith in what family meant. And more than that, she had helped him begin to believe again, too. But was love strong enough to withstand the schemes now resurfacing? Would this revealed truth spark a brutal legal battle where love and money would collide? My dear viewers, take a breath, maybe grab a glass of water, and stay with us. The story ahead holds even greater surprises. Comment 1 if you think this story is worth it, so we'll know you're still here with us. That Sunday morning unfolded in an unusual stillness. The kitchen carried the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the scratch of colored pencils on paper. As Andrew approached the refrigerator, he froze. Among hastily pinned notes and a few bills, Elliot had carefully placed a new drawing. 3 stick figures stood side by side. A dark-haired man, a blonde-haired boy, and a brown-haired woman with a full, radiant smile. Above them, in shaky but determined letters, were the words, "My family." Andrew stood still. The simple drawing weighed as heavily as thousands of pages of court documents. What his son had drawn did not come from legal rulings or insurance clauses, but from the innocent heart of a child. Elliot did not need to know about signatures of abandonment or disputes over assets. He simply drew what he longed for most: a family, a place where his heart could belong. And in that picture, Claire appeared as though it was the most natural thing in the world. By afternoon, Portland's sky had turned to honey, Washington Park glowing in the fiery red and orange of late autumn maples. Leaves rustled beneath their steps, a soft breeze tousling Claire's brown hair. They walked as if it had become a new ritual. Andrew holding Elliot's hand, Claire walking alongside, sometimes kneeling to tie the boy's shoelaces or gently brushing strands of hair from his forehead. Words were few, yet peace radiated, filling the emptiness Andrew had not dared to dream of for years. Beneath a blazing red maple tree, Andrew stopped. His heart beat fast, though his face was calmer than ever. He lowered to one knee and drew from his pocket a small box. Inside was no extravagant jewel, only a simple silver ring, gleaming in the glow of the sunset. He looked up, his eyes meeting Claire's astonished face. For a moment, Claire covered her mouth, her eyes glistening. She didn't need poetic words. The act itself was enough. Andrew's voice was low but steady. Elliot chose you. So did I. And now, I ask only one thing: will you stay? For us? Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks, not from pain, but from sudden, pure joy. She nodded, softly yet firmly. In that instant, every hardship, every lonely day that once seemed endless dissolved away. In its place, a new home opened, one where she was not only the giver, but someone loved, someone needed. From a distance, behind the trees, a familiar figure watched silently. Vanessa stood there, eyes blazing, jaw clenched. She had returned in hopes of reclaiming power, yet what lay before her was a truth she could not deny. Her son had already chosen. Elliot had not run toward her. He had not drawn her in his picture of family. And now, before her very eyes, Andrew was offering a ring to another woman, the one Elliot had embraced with his heart. A bright laugh broke through the heavy air. Elliot ran toward them, his little arms stretched wide, wrapping around them both. He looked up, eyes shining, and declared as if announcing to the world, "Now we're a family forever." Andrew held his son, his other arm tightening around Claire, and within that embrace, he felt something he thought he had lost long ago. Peace. Not the peace of wealth or prestige, but the peace of a true home. Maple leaves swirled around them, bearing witness to a new beginning. But was this happiness truly safe? Or was the shadow of the past still lurking, waiting for its final chance? The Portland sky was unusually clear that morning. Gentle sunlight streamed through the branches, painting a scene so peaceful it made passers-by stop in their tracks. Beneath an old oak in Forest Park, simple white chairs had been set in 2 rows, adorned with small bundles of wildflowers hastily gathered from the local market. There was no grand ballroom, no dazzling chandeliers, yet the air here carried something far more precious: sincerity. Close friends, a few colleagues, and even elderly patients from Street Mary's nursing home sat in neat rows, their faces glowing as if they were witnessing a small miracle. Elliot, in an oversized child suit, scattered petals clumsily along the aisle, laughing gleefully, his golden hair flying in the breeze. Each falling petal was more than decoration. It was a message, a blessing for the new beginning of this little family. Claire walked forward in a simple ivory dress that framed her slender figure, no extravagance, only the quiet grace that was hers alone. Elliot suddenly dashed over, his small hand gripping hers tightly, refusing to let go. The guests burst into laughter, and even the officiant chuckled, nodding. Well, it seems the ceremony is already complete. Andrew looked at Claire, his eyes brimming with emotion. As he slipped the simple silver ring onto her hand, his voice trembled but remained steady. "You haven't just changed our lives. You've made them whole." Claire smiled through her tears, her eyes shining with an irreplaceable light. She whispered, "I didn't come here to find love. I just showed up, and love found me." Cheers rang throughout the park. Elliot skipped around the small circle, shouting proudly, "I have a mom now." Laughter erupted, mingling with the rustle of wind through the leaves, as though nature itself was blessing their new home. After the ceremony, the three of them sat on a picnic blanket beneath the oak, sharing sandwiches, sipping lemonade, and laughing together. No lavish banquet was needed, just this simple moment that was everything. Claire leaned her head against Andrew's shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart, while Elliot played with the neighbor's puppy, his laughter echoing across the space. From a distance, Helen sat in her wheelchair, her eyes shimmering, a gentle smile etched on her weathered face. She whispered to the nurse beside her, the words soft but clear enough for Claire to hear. "Blood creates a child, but love creates a mother." Claire squeezed Andrew's hand, tilting her head slightly toward him. Her voice shook, warm yet fragile. "That day, I had nothing but $3. And in the end, I found something priceless." Andrew didn't answer, he only leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. In that moment, every empty space, every wound once thought unhealable seemed to vanish. Elliot ran back, wedging himself between them, his eyes shining and his grin wide. Andrew's arm wrapped around them both. Claire's arms tightened, and Elliot burrowed in as though this was the only safe place he had ever dreamed of. They sat there, beneath the old oak in Portland's sunset, not needing grandeur, not needing gilded promises, only needing each other. A home eternal had been born, not through blood, not through law, but through choice and love. And is there anything more precious than this? When a heart once broken finds a place to belong, and a child can finally call someone by the word mother? Sometimes family isn't created by blood, but by love and choice. Andrew, Claire, and Elliot have proven that even from the deepest wounds, happiness can bloom if we dare to open our hearts. This story reminds us, as long as a heart shows up at the right moment, love will always find its way. If this story touched you, leave a comment right now and share your feelings, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay with our channel. Who knows? The next story might be exactly what you've been waiting for.